and welcome to the inaugural episode of Two Friends Watch. My name's Andrew. I'm here today with my good friend Daniel, who's joined me. I'm currently recording in Edinburgh right now. Daniel's down south in...
Chelmsford.
What's the name of it? Chelmsford, which is, for anyone who's across the pond right now, is just east of London.
It's practically London. That really upsets people when you say that, though, so, you know.
Okay, right. I'll keep that quiet from now on. Anyway, this is our inaugural run at a podcast.
Our dry run.
Our inaugural run. It sounds better when I say it like that.
I don't know what it means, though.
First. It means first.
Why don't you just say first? Less syllables, easier to say.
But inaugural sounds so much cooler.
Fair enough.
Anyway, this has been our thing. Both of us, back when we were back in our university days, we did a radio show together, and we were talking about all sorts of pop culture, movies, music, games, books, whatever came to mind for any given week, and just sort of having a laugh on the airwaves, and nobody listened to it. It was great. But we both since graduated.
We got listeners.
Did we? When?
I remember strictly, because remember we had like the board thing that people could post live comments that we could, question and answer thing. And I remember I'm very sure it happened that we were doing one of our shows, and the board was flooded with people asking for us to end and for the next show to start.
So, auspicious start for our new podcast.
The important thing is we got listeners in a roundabout way.
Well, true enough. But, it's experience. There's a learning curve here. So we hope you'll forgive us if we're a little rusty. The plan for this new podcast, for our inaugural episode of a podcast...
First episode.
To talk about movies. We're now exclusively movie people. And we're just going to be going back and forth, week to week. I believe we're doing this weekly, aren't we?
Yeah, should be weekly. Apart from, Christmas.
Because, of course, who does anything on Christmas?
That's very true. I think a nice little starting, since this might be our first one, or might not be, who knows, we should probably discuss any movies we like.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not big on movies. I love movies, I've just never watched that many. That might not make sense to a lot of people. But I do enjoy a movie when I get round to watching one. I just haven't got a big backlog. A lot of classic movies that are out there that I just never got around to seeing. Some of the shameful secrets like Big Lebowski. Never seen it.
A lot of people haven't seen Big Lebowski.
Godfather.
Oh, that's bad.
That's pretty really bad.
Yeah, you shouldn't admit that.
Yeah, there's quite a lot. It's not good.
So, anyway, we're going to be taking it week about.
Mm-hmm.
1 week I choose a movie, 1 week you choose a movie. It's going to be just a variety of cult classics, old movies that just speak to us on some level, and, well, we're going to be introducing it as something that's important to us, and forcing the other one to watch along with us, and just see where our opinions converge and where they differ.
You had to pick a horror movie as the first one, didn't you?
Of course I did.
I'm not a big fan of horror movies, and you just had to pick a horror movie.
Oh, come on. You liked it.
I suppose it wasn't as bad. It's not like a jump scare horror movie, which could have been much worse. It was it's like a thriller, an atmospheric thriller.
Yeah, it's sort of a genre mashup. And incidentally, the movie we're talking about today, we finally get to it, is Antonia Bird's Ravenous from 1999, starring Guy Pearce and Robert Carlyle.
Oh, Robert Carlyle!
Oh, Robert, he's by far the best part of the film, but...
he really is.
Yeah.
Oh...
You can sound a bit less like a fangirl there, don't you?
I can't help it. He's just so great. He's such a weirdo. Every role he plays is a weirdo. Fantastic weirdo. I mean, he's one of the best acting weirdos out there. But just such a weirdo.
I know, but thankfully he does get to keep his native Scottish accent, like me. Despite the fact that the movie takes place in the 1840s during the US-Mexican War.
I'm Scottish as well.
Yeah, but you don't sound it,
I
and
know,
it's a podcast.
I know. It's not fair.
Oh, well.
Such a nice accent.
Anyway, 1840s, US-Mexican War, and Guy Pearce is playing a captain who has just recently been promoted.
John Boyd.
Captain John Boyd.
Just.
Been promoted to captain. despite his total ineptitude as a soldier, as we soon learn. He was involved in a battle with Mexican forces where his forces were being slaughtered.
Badly. I mean, they were quite graphic with that. You know, it's a reasonably oldish film now, and it was quite graphic.
1999, I mean, it's not excessive for 1999, is it?
15 years ago.
Anyway, Guy Pearce, he basically lies down and plays dead, despite the fact that all of his comrades are sort of crying for help and asking him to save them. And he just lies down, plays dead, and lets himself get carted off in a body cart by the Mexicans. While he's in this cart, he has a little bit of his superior officer's blood come down and trickle into his mouth.
I think it's a lot more than a little bit.
Well, it's as much as goes in,
I mean, he was like coughing it out, like spraying mouthfuls of blood out, trying to breathe.
Yeah, well, considering what we see later on in the film.
Yeah, okay, in comparison, relative to later on in the movie, that's not that much blood.
But all of a sudden, he gets a massive adrenaline surge. He gets this massive rush of virility that allows him to single-handedly dig himself out from under this mountain of corpses and single-handedly slaughter the whole Mexican command.
Well, you do see that it's not really a slaughter. He sneaks up behind the boss and just goes, it's mine now. And I wasn't really like, he didn't go Rambo or, go crazy and just, Arnold Schwarzenegger holding a machine gun with one hand, mowing down an entire platoon of Mexicans. It was basically sneak up, got you, right, everyone surrender, I've got the boss.
Well,
it was like the world's worst game of capture the flag.
I think there was implied that there were things we weren't seeing off screen, but
yeah.
I always got the impression that he was just holding up that one Mexican dude, and it cuts away from the flashback at that point, but I always had the impression that he shoots the guy, and he goes on a complete rampage throughout the Mexican compound, but we don't see that because it's not that kind of movie.
You see, I disagree on that one, because throughout the movie, we very clearly get the impression that he is a bit of a coward.
Except when he's been... but that's a spoiler, and we shouldn't give that away just yet. Because you see, this is a movie about I believe it's the Native American legend of the Wendigo.
Wendigo?
I think
it's... I don't know where... Let's go for Wendigo.
That sounds better, I think.
Yeah, let's go for Wendigo.
Yes. Anyway, Boyd's superiors, they realize that essentially he'd been a total coward, but they don't want to court-martial him or execute him because it would set a bad precedent, so instead he gets shipped off to California, just on the west side of the Sierra Nevada mountains, where there's this outpost being captained by... I forget the character's name, but he's being played by Jeffrey Jones, the head teacher from Ferris Bueller.
That was the first thing I thought as well. I was like, oh, it's the head teacher. That's fantastic. Colonel Hart?
Colonel Hart, that's it.
That's it, yeah. Jeffrey Jones.
Jeffrey Jones, yeah.
That's
big
yeah.
Fat guy. He's put on a lot of weight since Ferris Bueller.
Quite a bit. He's such a. I don't know. Every time I see him, I find him a comical actor. But that might just been a leftover impression from Ferris Bueller. I just can't take him as a serious actor.
Well, yeah, it's just kind of jarring because he appears in this film not at all as a military man. He's just this really meek, sort of philosophical guy who just doesn't occur as a fighter at all. And that's pretty much the story for all these guys at this outpost. You've got a variety of other privates. You've got one guy who's a stoner. You've got one guy who's this Christian missionary type, very, very meek. And you've only got one guy played by Neil McDonough, Private Reich, who doesn't get nearly as big a part in this movie as he should have.
Now he is the crazy soldier, isn't he? Who just crazy, kind of wanting to kill everybody, needs some action, getting twitchy kind of guy, isn't he?
Like every time he appears on screen and he's not digging an axe into somebody's head, you can tell he really wants to be. And his introduction, I actually thought was the funniest part of the movie, because we're getting this sort of montage of all the characters who are present on this outpost.
Mm-hmm.
And was it Colonel Hart just says, yes, Private Reich, he's our soldier, and you just cut over to Reich standing in the middle of like this icy glacial melt.
He's just shouting. He's like, "Ah!"
Stripped to the waist, just doing this massive Sylvester Stallone Rambo scream. It's amazing.
And then Hart's just like, yeah, you should keep away from him.
That's glorious.
It's so great. Oh, it's so much fun.
The film gets progressively less funny as it goes on, but when it starts out, it's quite funny indeed.
You see, it's funny, in the film, I didn't have that many qualms with how everything kind of fits together. It's like, okay, that's fine, makes sense. And then, right at the end, I feel like there were some gapingly awful plot holes. Like, just, really? Yeah, right at the end, it was like, it's like, oh, they did this when you had the good guy at your fingertips. All you had to do was just one more thing, and you won. But instead, you decide to drag this fight out even longer, and it's like, I don't know, it just seems a little silly at the end.
Ah, well, we'll get to that.
Yeah, but
anyway, life in this outpost is obviously total tedium. It's just this place they send all the sort of misfits in the army to die. But then one night, they see a man outside, and this is Robert Carlyle.
Playing a character known as Colquhoun.
Yes, who's some sort of Scottish missionary who is on his way west through the Sierra Nevada mountains with a party of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And they get led astray by someone called Colonel Ives, who we never see in the flashback.
No, we don't. That is odd.
And they take what was supposed to be a shortcut at Colonel Ives' suggestion.
Turns out it wasn't a shortcut. They get caught in a terrible storm. They go hide in a cave until the storm blows over. Storm doesn't really blow over. The winter sets in. They eat the horses, they eat the dog, they eat the oxen, and then they eat their belt buckles and their shoes, and then they try to eat some roots, but, doesn't quite nourish you. And then, someone died of malnourishment. So they ate him.
And this is a direct quote from the film, and it's one of my favourite lines in the film, when Robert Carlyle is narrating all this in flashback, and he says, "And then things got out of hand."
Yeah, we ate the man. Then it got out of hand. Whoa, what?
They start getting a little stabby up in there. Colonel Ives, we hear, went a little kill crazy and started actually
butchering people, literally.
Doing malnourishment's job for it.
He literally butchered people.
Oh yeah, and thus we get into the meat of the film, as it were.
Oh, that was bad.
No, it just sort of came
That was
to me.
Bad. Apologise.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. This film had loads of great taglines when it came out.
It did. I have a list of the taglines, actually. Would you like to hear them, Andrew?
I would like to hear the taglines, Andrew.
So the taglines I found is, "Survival is not the only option." I thought that was quite nice. "Get a taste for terror." That was quite funny. "Eat up."
Not bad.
Yeah.
But my favourite one is "You are who you eat."
Yeah. And then there was another one I found. "Bon appetit."
Not bad at all. We should point out this film didn't make any money.
No, I was looking into that. Nothing. It had an estimated budget, from what I managed to find, of $12 million.
Yeah, it got... I think it made something like $3 million when it came out, which is just horrible.
It just didn't make money. It's an alright film as well, It's an alright film.
These weird ones from the 90s that I just don't get why it flopped, a bit like Strange Days. It's,
Never seen it.
Well, you should.
Yeah, so we learn of, they go off and try and find this cave and try and, because Colquhoun ran away. We learn he ran away, and so they're like, oh, Colonel Ives and one of the other ones, he left them two alone. And they were like, oh my god, Colonel Ives, he's going to kill her. So they all went to try and rescue him, and then the movie gets kind of wild, kind of dark and wild after that. So we can't really say much more after that, really, because then it gets kind of spoilery, and that's for the second half of this podcast.
But I think we can get into spoiler territory now. Can we just flag up the spoiler warning now?
Well, I was just going to go through a few stats and things that I found while I was just doing a bit of background research. You see, it's interesting. You're talking about it flopped. See, I was looking at Metacritic, and if the critics gave it a 45 out of 100. Now, that's pretty bad.
Critics hated this movie, but audiences, the people who actually went to see it, loved it.
The users, the people who went to see it, more of them, gave it an 8.4 out of 10. But yeah, like I said, it was 1999, released in September 1999. But I was doing some looking through IMBD or IBDM, whatever that website's called.
You managed to get that wrong twice in a row. It's not that hard, Daniel.
I never IMDb. There you go.
Not bad.
I read it. But yeah, I was reading, and there was a little bit of controversy in the movie. 'Cause who did you say the director was?
Antonia Bird.
Did you know he wasn't the original director?
She, and yes.
Yeah. Now, how am I going to pronounce this name? Milcho Manchevsky? I can get the second name spot on, Manchevsky. The first one, not so well. But he did the first 2 weeks, apparently, of the movie. And from what I've managed to read, he was kind of a tyrant. And just an unpleasant person. He just didn't get on with the studio. He made all the actors and the production staff, their lives are miserable. And 2 weeks in, he was basically shipped off. And production was put on hold for a little bit. And then Antonia Bird was brought on board. But apparently he was not a nice person.
That actually makes sense in a way, because it kind of accounts for how the film sort of goes from one tone to the other over the course of the film, where it's, by the time you get to the end, it's really hard to reconcile some of the goofy moments that it started out with.
But that's, of course, assuming that they, film the movie in order.
Well, a lot of the time they do that, sort of, but it varies.
And interestingly enough, is Antonia Bird had previously worked with Robert Carlyle on 2 other films, Priest and Face. I have no idea what these movies were about, but I thought it was an interesting coincidence, and it kind of gives the impression that Robert Carlyle may have suggested for her to be the director.
That sounds cool. Well, it was a good choice because, this film is actually really tight. It looks great, and there's all sorts of little details in the background and the mise-en-scène, and she gets a great performance out of Guy Pearce.
Oh, yes.
He just looks throughout the whole first half of the film like this really frightened rabbit, or like a...
Oh, man, he just, apparently, he's the main actor. It's not until 25 minutes into the film before he says his first line.
You're just looking at the IMDb trivia page, aren't you?
I've got most of these from that page, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
But I meant to check. I was like, really? 25 minutes in before his first line? And he is in every scene, right from the start. And I'm just surprised.
That sort of depends on whether or not you count his narration over a flashback as, dialogue. He has dialogue over his flashback where he was killing the Mexicans, and that's like 10 minutes in, so I don't think IMDb is totally accurate there.
That's fair enough. That's
the problem. It's IMDb.
I never got around to double checking that. But yeah, so overall, Andrew, what did you think of the movie? Before we move on to the second half of the show.
I love it. I think it's a fantastic period horror movie. Really great sort of period detail. I love that it's actually set in the sort of pre-Civil War U.S. It's like the U.S.-Mexican War isn't a time period that gets a lot of love from...
Not really. When was that? That was so they said it's set, or you get that little Mexican-American War and then the date. So the date given was 1847.
Yeah, 1840s. Remember the Alamo and all that.
Yeah. Oh.
And aside from being really quite intense and depicting this really grim conflict between Guy Pearce and Robert Carlyle's character as sort of two opposites, like two karmic opposites, if you like.
Mm.
There's a lot of really great gory horror set pieces.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, particularly towards the end, and the whole treatment of cannibalism is just really distinctive and kind of off kilter.
And it's done so smoothly as well. It's done so relaxed and almost comical. Like the villain of the movie is just relaxed and just I found myself rooting for the bad guy more often than not in this, and I was like, this is a horrendous cannibal that's planning on eating everyone eventually,
Well,
and it's like, it's just, I was like, I can't believe I'm rooting for this guy, but
we should back up a little, because, as we said, this is about the legend of the Wendigo. The Wendigo. Which apparently has it that a human who consumes the flesh of another human will attain greater strength and, be able to recover from illness and injury. And this, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, is Robert Carlyle. Because, in fact, there is no Colonel Ives.
We did not give them enough time for spoiler alerts.
Oh, come on.
We were going to give them like a 10-second warning so that they could, alright, I've heard about the movie, I'm going to go watch, I don't want it spoiled. That wasn't 10 seconds.
I'll just put in 10 seconds of silence in post.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think next time we should do a proper 10-second, though, rather than cutting you off half-sentence for 10 seconds and then finishing your sentence.
But yes, Robert Carlyle is Colonel Ives. So Colquhoun is Ives. Ives is Colquhoun. There was no Ives or there was no Colquhoun. It's never entirely clear. Point is, he ate all of those people, and he's lured the soldiers out to the cave to eat all of them as well. And yeah, after this scene where it's really disturbing, where Carlyle gets really twitchy and really sort of feral and ferrety, he just sort of snaps and just kills every soldier who went with him to the cave.
He did, but that's the thing. Like, did he snap and kill everyone, or was the whole thing planned right from the start? Because I think he planned it right from the start.
Possibly one of those delightful little ambiguities, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like, the only little thing I have about that scene is right before he kind of snaps, his hands are tied and bound because he's caught licking the blood from another soldier's wound. And everyone kind of freaks out, understandably. So they're like, "What are you doing?" He's like, I don't know. I had a nightmare. I don't know. I'm not feeling too well. Tie my hands up. I'm not safe. Tie my hands up." So they do that. So they get to the cave. A few of them go in the cave. A few of them wait outside, sort of thing. And so the scene the camera is on him. His hands all tied up. He's going a little crazy, looking a bit wild-eyed. Camera pans to a few other scenes, cuts back to him, and his hands are just loose. There's no sign of a rope. There's no sign of, like, snapped rope or anything. The rope vanished.
True, but before that, we see him scrambling around in the dirt, where he's trying to dig something up. It looks like where he's, digging into the ground like an animal. The implication being that, he left a knife there before he left from the cave.
But after the rope is all done and cut off, he then goes back to digging the hole, then pulls out the knife out the ground. And it's like, why would you cut the rope in your hand, stand up, walk away, then walk back, and then pick up the knife? That just seemed a little... that whole situation seemed a little out of order. I was like, that seemed like it could have done a bit tidier. That's my only comment, is it could have been done a bit tidier.
Maybe a little bit of a continuity error, but who knows what Ives or Colquhoun is thinking, because essentially the idea is that cannibalism makes you this kind of addict. You need to satiate the hunger after you've tasted it for the first time.
Now, Andrew, did you think that Ives or Colquhoun, do you think he was a very clever man, calculating man, before he became a Wendigo, or before he became this addict, or do you think that was part of his transformation? Because throughout the rest of the second half of that movie, he is just cold, he is calculating, he is 3 steps ahead, all the way till the end. And I'm thinking, and again, there's no real right or wrong answer, because we've never really shown what it was like before. But it's was he, do you think he was... did you get the impression he was an intelligent man before?
Well, it's one of those sort of... again, it's an ambiguity. It's a little like trying to work out the Joker's past in a way, because towards the second half of this movie, Ives occurs as this incredible, really primal force of nature antagonist. And, whatever we learn about his past is only something we have his word for.
Yeah.
So it's not really possible to glean anything about his character, or whether or not, the Wendigo transformed him mentally as well as physically.
I got the impression it seems to transform the victim mentally as well. Anything that can give you like a deep addiction like that from only a small amount, it must do something else to your brain. That can't be the only thing.
Which is kind of the conflict that we run into with Guy Pearce, because obviously Guy Pearce, as we know, he ingested some of his commanding officer's blood back in the battle with the Mexicans, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, Ives sort of latches onto Boyd, sort of recognizes him as a sort of kindred spirit, wants to shape him into one of his own, or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the point where the film starts getting really sinister. Because from this little skirmish at the cave, Boyd is the only one who escapes.
Yep.
Gets back to the outpost, where...
Well, the only way Boyd really lives is by eating the crazy soldier guy.
Yeah, Private Reich.
Private Reich, and like...
He has to do it again, essentially.
Yeah, so he has to live, he has to put himself deeper into this hellhole and become closer. Because you get the impression that the more you eat, the more you want to eat, but the powerful you get. So the idea is that Boyd, he's fighting it all the way from the start. You can see he's fighting it. And then he's like seriously wounded, and he's staying in this hole. And you see him; he tries to eat roots, and it's not getting him anywhere. And he just kind of snaps, and he's like, you're dead. He says like, you're dead. You're safe. You're dead. You're safe. And he starts like hacking a chunk out of his leg, quite graphically with a knife, like a big fleshy bit out of his leg. And then like the very next scene, he just arises out of the cave like with a limp.
I know, it's pretty mental. There's obviously a lot of images there to do with the Donner Party and, trying to...
I did think that, yeah.
Evoke that. But, I have to admit, it's also kind of a contrivance. Because, who ends up accidentally in a situation where they end up ingesting other people so regularly?
Yeah.
That seems to happen to Boyd a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's just unlucky, Yeah,
it's like he's just sort of this cosmic play.
Some people, aren't very good with stairs. Some people aren't good with electronics.
Some people get struck by lightning a bunch of times.
Yeah, and then some people just end up in situations where they drink blood and eat flesh accidentally every time. These things happen, the world spins. But it's the one thing I picked up very early in the movie as well is the music.
Oh, yeah, this is another thing I was wanting to talk about. The score is really distinctive and really idiosyncratic. It was composed by two guys, Michael Nyman and Damon Albarn, who I believe, if my sister is correct, but I'm going to have to check this, I believe we're both involved with the Gorillaz at some point.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, but there's a lot of really weird musical cues throughout, and there's one in particular I really like, is a theme that plays both midway through the movie when Boyd is making his way back to the outpost, and over the end credits scene.
Is that eerily cheery music?
Yes, yeah, it is.
I don't understand that. It's like the worst part of not like the actual worst part, it's like the darkest part of the film, and they start playing this kind of upbeat, light tempo, kind of almost like folk pop dancey kind of song thing, and I'm like, what is going on? Because the music is freaking me out way more than what's going on screen right now. Because it's just eerie. It's just like cheerily eerie. Like, it just gives me the shivers even thinking about it. If I don't hear that music again anytime too soon, I'll be a happy guy.
I'm going to send you a link.
I know you are.
Yeah, it's actually a track called Boyd's Journey. It starts out with this sort of series of just really basic plucking and plunking away on a banjo, and then they start to layer in some more organs and synths and stuff. It's great.
Organs. Sounds like dinner served.
No, you have to apologize.
I am so sorry for that. I couldn't help it.
Yeah. We're even now.
Yeah, we are. But yeah, the music is just that was probably the most distinctive feature of the movie, I would say, is perhaps Robert Carlyle or the music more than anything else. That is what I will take home from this movie, is that music can obviously play a huge role, more than people give it credit to, because Oh man, it's a haunting song, really is.
Most great horror movies have really characteristic soundtracks, like, I mean, obviously Tubular Bells,
Mm-hmm.
The Exorcist,
Yep.
Carpenter's score for Halloween, it's like the Goblin score for Suspiria.
You know, Tubular Bells. I actually got a copy of it, and the later half of that, it's quite a long song, and the later half of that song is surprisingly like upbeat and cheery. You know, the start is really like, you know, one sort of tone, very dark, very sinister, foreboding kind of feel about it, but the rest is like really nice, happy. It's odd.
Yeah, but
It's very
obviously
odd.
they just appropriated the sinister bit for The Exorcist.
Yeah,
You know, that
I think they should have taken the cheery bit and gone the same way as this movie did.
the movie does have kind of a bittersweet ending, though, I guess, because, not to put too fine a point on it, Colquhoun resurfaces now as a member of the military. He's rebranded himself as Colonel Ives, and he's been made the head of this outpost.
Mm-hmm.
Now that Jeffrey Jones is dead, or so we think. The remaining people who are still at the outpost essentially get massacred by Robert Carlyle, except for Martha, I think.
Yeah, Martha's the only one who survives.
The Native American woman, she actually gets away.
Originally, her character was meant to be a brother.
But the stoner who gets played by David Arquette and...
Plays it very well, by the way. He plays that stoner to a T.
Oh yeah, he really sells that. And the drunken major, they both die. And they get cooked into a stew, which is eaten by Robert Carlyle and, dun dun dun, Jeffrey Jones, who is alive and also a cannibal.
One of my favourite quotes is the drunken majors. Do you want any help with the stew? No, it's fine. I'm sure later on you can contribute. I cracked up. I really did. It was so good.
It's such a marvelous moment. The comedy is so dry and so dark in this movie. It almost doesn't register until you think about it.
It's actually a fairly funny movie at times, which I think makes it worse.
What was the other one? It's lonely being a cannibal. Tough to make friends.
Another one is when he eats a bit of his fallen comrade in the pit, and then gets better and leaves, and then Colonel Ives says, I found Private Reich. You never finished him. To be fair, he was a bit tough, as all good soldiers should be.
Yeah.
That's so dark. So
when
dark.
Talking about humans in terms of their like actual material constitution.
Oh, it's very dark. But so you find out that the general survives.
Well, the Colonel.
Colonel.
Well, not to get confused, because General Slauson actually does show up again. He comes back for reinforcements. And that's kind of the end of the film, because Boyd and Ives basically just confront each other and just beat the shit out of each other. It's great. Because both of them at this point have ingested a fair bit of human meat, and they're both healing from their injuries basically as fast as they can inflict them.
Yeah.
So just stabbing the hell out of each other.
Really nastily.
Keep getting back up for more.
The actual ending to the movie wasn't meant to be anything like that, from what I've managed to read. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything on the internet of what the original ending was meant to be. But apparently they scrapped the original ending, and then Guy Pearce and Robert Carlyle just came up with the idea of beating the hell out of each other for ages and ages, which, in my opinion, was a pretty good ending.
Yeah, it's pretty cathartic to see, because the cannibalism is, for the first half of the movie, it's only very subtly demonstrated. It's like Robert Carlyle makes an unusually fast recovery from his time in the wilderness.
Yeah, and makes the quote is said, it's surprising you don't have any frostbite.
Yeah, exactly. It's being hinted at from very early on, but it's only towards the very end of the film that we really see the full extent of these powers they've acquired, essentially. And it's really cathartic to watch.
It was great. It really was. It was funny. This was a bit of the problem I had, though. I feel like the final fight scene actually dragged out too long. I mean, I've made notes of where basically, there's a scene where Ives is on the floor. He's been, stabbed with a pitchfork, but Boyd's been stabbed with a knife. But Boyd's got this huge log, and he just raises it above his head and smashes down on Ives. And it really hurts Ives. You can see it's really doing damage. And he does it once, and then he just kind of looks at him, drops the log, and then decides to wrestle. And I'm like, no. Like, you hit him 4 or 5 more times with that log, you win. Job's done. We're finished. We can go home. We're tidy. We're done. Finished. But, like, I know they've got to drag the fight scene out, but then, later on in the fight scene, Ives does the exact same thing. So Ives has got Boyd up against a post. This is, like, right at the end, the very last, like, 30 seconds. Boyd's, like, lying on the floor, bleeding, it's just a mess. Ives picks him up, has a knife, and then he just throws the knife away and starts wrestling. And I'm thinking, seriously, like, Ives, stab him. Twice. You win. Job's done, we're finished. And then they just start wrestling again on the floor, and it's like, really? Like, I could have, like, turned a blind eye on, like, dropping an obvious weapon to drag the fight out a bit longer. You know, a lot of movies do that sort of thing. But doing it twice, very, very obviously, it just seemed kind of like, guys, you're kind of pushing this, you know, you're railroading this into how you want it to look, not how it's kind of coming across. That's the problem I had. That was probably my biggest problem with this movie, was the ending. It was great, it was violent, it was bloody, but it just seemed horrifically scripted, which was kind of funny because from what I managed to read, it actually wasn't scripted. They just kind of winged it with the fight scenes a little bit. And I was like, it just come across as terribly false.
Well, that's kind of what... I mean, improvising a fight isn't going to flow like, you know, an actual fight would. You know, it's like they still have to, you know, pause for edits and, you know, come back for reshoots. It's going to have a bit of a scrappy rhythm to it.
Just dropping the weapon twice was a bit... just after nasty taste. But that is my, like... It's pretty much my biggest gripe of the whole movie, is that. That is my biggest thing, and it's not even a major point, so... You know, the rest of the movie was great. But yeah, so like we were saying, you know, at the end of the movie, they beat the hell out of each other.
And eventually, Boyd manages to grab Ives and sandwiches them both in this huge, colossal bear trap.
Huge bear trap.
Basically bisects them while they're pinned together.
And you learn here, I don't know the myth, maybe it's just not mentioned, but I thought to myself, okay, they're kind of lying on top of each other, they're both dying. And Ives says, you know, if you die, I'm going to eat you and survive. But the question is, if I die, what are you going to do, Boyd? And that's a really interesting conundrum.
Yeah, because that's essentially the real moral center of the movie right there.
Yeah, right there. That hits the nail on the head. My little qualm is, hold on, since when have you needed the person to die before you eat them? Eat him while he's alive, if that's going to save your life. Does the magic not work if he's still alive when you start to eat him?
Yeah, I kind of thought that to myself as well, which is, okay, they're sort of aiming for the moral dilemma angle here, so...
A little thing I thought was a bit odd, but, you know, it was a great ending. I actually did, and, you know, I'm sad like this, I did a few little comparison measurements, because you get a good panning of... They both die, by the way, spoiler alert, they both die, and Boyd decides not to eat him, and Boyd dies. Fantastic moment, by the way, when Boyd is just about to die. He looks over at the door, and the sister, Martha, the female Native American, she opens the door, and she sees him, and she just closes the door and leaves. And doesn't leave the area. I mean, she just walks right out of the fort and just goes. And I thought that was a fantastic, like, nope. She just sees it and goes, nope, 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 shut the door, nope, walk away, walk out the fort, nope. I just thought that was a fantastic moment. But, so they all die, they both die together.
Fantastic resolution to Boyd's whole character arc, because the whole basis of the story is that he's this coward who's afraid to die, and he's been given this lifeline all these times by doing this morally reprehensible thing in eating another person. And, you know, he decides that, no, it's not worth it. It's like, I'm brave enough to die now. Or it's like, Ives always puts it to him, like, no, being brave means you're actually going to do this, and you're going to eat people and live forever, manifest destiny, and all that stuff.
I did a little bit of measurements. There's the final scene is the camera panning away, and you see Robert Carlyle and Guy Pearce like lying together in this huge bear trap thing. And I got a bit of paper and I did some measuring of the diameter of this bear trap compared to Robert Carlyle. Now, it was at least half his height.
Okay.
So I looked on the internet. Obviously, it's very easy to find. That means that it would make it 86.5 centimeters in diameter, or roughly 2.8 feet in diameter.
Okay.
That's massive. What are they trying to catch? A giant? A bear could walk.
Bears.
Bear trap. Like, it catches their foot, it pins them down, and the hunter comes and shoots them. What is this meant to do to a bear? Chop it in half? Save the butcher a job? I was like,
There's different kinds of bear traps, man.
I don't know. I just didn't know bear traps came in such gargantuan sizes.
Well, maybe they did in the 1840s. Who's to know?
Maybe it was a breed of bear we don't have anymore.
Prop designers. I mean, we're British. We don't have bears.
We have some very vicious foxes, I'll have you know.
Yeah, I mean, all the rich, upper class twits. They feel very threatened by those foxes.
I would be interested to know when Boyd would find the time to set up such a bear trap.
Well, we did see it beforehand. I mean,
he looks at the bear traps, but then they kind of get in a fight again, and then he runs off, and then several minutes later, Ives catches up. I guess he could have done it in that time, but it seemed a bit fine cut. I was making notes on the movie, by the way, throughout, sort of thing, and
yeah, we noticed.
Yeah, there's one scene that just. Perhaps one of the best scenes for me was with the stew, the human stew. So you've got these generals, the generals of
stew a la Major Knox.
Yes. So the generals come back and they start looking for people. And at this point, Ives and Boyd are pretty much dead. They're looking around, looking in different places, and the general goes into the kitchen and he sees the stew cooking, and he starts smelling it, and I actually write down. A little thing to myself, like, wouldn't it be hilarious if he tried a bit? And as I was writing that down, I looked back to the screen, and he takes the ladle and just starts eating it.
Yeah, and he loves it.
And I was like, it's a perfect lineup for a sequel.
I know, unfortunately it'll never happen because the actor playing that guy died.
And it had nothing to do with the fact that they made no money.
Yeah, that too. But yeah, just interesting trivia. That was Jeffrey Jones in his final performance. He did The West Wing for a few years after that, but then he died in 2005. So yeah, that was pretty much his last act on the silver screen was to become a cannibal. So
what a great way for people to remember you.
Rivals James Dean, doesn't it?
Another interesting little scene that came to mind, and maybe you can enlighten me, Andrew, on this one. Colonel Ives, or Cahoon, he's like a wild man. He's living in a cave, and he's like all hairy and matted, and he looks awful. And
yeah, of course.
Yeah, so you got that, and then Boyd, injured, eats the man. He's back to full health. Goes back to the fort. A few days later, Colquhoun turns up, but now he's Colonel Ives, and he's wearing this pristine uniform, and he rides in on a horse, almost clean shaven. Whether he's got I think he's like a mustache and a beard sort of thing, but like a little goatee thing, but not nearly as horrible. And he's like perfectly clean, and he rides in on a perfectly ironed general's suit, and I'm thinking a colonel's suit, and I'm thinking, how?
Well, that's the fun of it, isn't it? Again, I come back to the comparison to like Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight, where it's like the incomprehensible stuff he does off screen is part of the fun. It's like he's supposed to be this sort of primal force of nature whose sole place in the universe is as an opposite to the protagonist. It's like he has to do stuff that doesn't make sense, otherwise he's not sinister.
I guess so. Makes perfect sense. It was just one of those little things. I was like, how did you get so clean? Okay, never mind.
I think he got a bit of a head start on Boyd as well, because I mean Boyd was there, sort of splinting up his leg for a few nights.
Well, that's true. I mean, he did have a while to tidy himself up, but all in all, I think that that was it. That's the end of the movie. That's all my little qualms and gripes, but overall, I loved the hell out of that movie. Really, the ending was a bit iffy for me. No, not every scene's going to be perfect. But overall, glad I saw it again. I saw it years ago, by the way. It was, and I saw it years ago, and then completely forgot about it. I mean, I knew I'd seen it, but I completely forgot what it was called, and it was just one of those things. And then Andrew picks his movie for this week, and it's Ravenous, and I was like, oh, this sounds drastic. Let's have a little read of the blurb, and I'm like, oh, it's cowboys and cannibals, and I was like, oh, it's this movie. Okay, great. Yeah. Could have been much worse.
Yeah, I love this one. It's just this really idiosyncratic horror movie that really isn't like anything else out there. Explores a setting and explores a theme that just no movie, as far as I'm aware, has ever done. I don't think there's ever been a Wendigo movie before, like, regardless of being set in the 1840s or not.
You just reminded me of one tiny, insignificant, but I have to bring it up detail that I just wanted to bring up. And Andrew, you can maybe enlighten me. So the whole idea of Wendigo, the more human flesh you eat, the stronger you get, sort of thing, yeah?
Yeah.
Then why does Ives not have a massive head start on Boyd? Because if you count it up, really, Boyd's at 4 people, I think, 3 or 4 people throughout the whole movie, even right at the end, like 3 or 4 people. Ives has had a fair amount of everybody involved.
Yeah, I think he's had like 8 or 9.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, maybe, I don't know the rules of the magic, or the rules of the legend, so maybe it just doesn't work like that, but Ives should be massively overpowering Boyd, like with one hand tied behind his back and a blindfold on, and he should be able to just beat the hell out of Boyd.
Well, I don't think it's like, I don't think it's like the Incredible Hulk. I don't think they sort of graphed this out on a geometric scale or anything like that.
That was actually something I wrote down, that Ives says that, up in those hills there'll be gold miners, prospectors, and they're all going to pass through the fort, and, they're going to eat some of them. Selectively, yeah. But they're going to eat some. And I thought, if it keeps going and you keep getting stronger, do you end up turning into, like, I don't know, like a superhuman, like Superman or Thor or, the Hulk, where you're just impervious to everything?
I think the movie just kind of leaves that up to you to decide. It's
I hope so.
I kind of hope so. I'd like to think that's what was implied.
I had a great thought as well. I thought, imagine if they find out that this is true. The modern world finds out this is true. Yeah. This magic works. Oh, I'm afraid you've got a terrible disease and you won't live unless you eat this homeless man. And then you'll be perfectly fine. A bit cursed, but other than that, you'll be perfectly fine. And I thought, imagine if the modern, how messed up the modern world would be if it was like, you're not well, you eat somebody. That's just... Which is
another thing that's slightly bothered me about this movie. I mean, it's not like the vampire mythos where you have to be bitten by someone very specific for this curse to happen. It's like, it can just happen almost spontaneously in a way.
You're telling me that in the world, like the modern world, like Victorian London sort of thing, somebody didn't accidentally get a little bit of blood of somebody else in their mouth for one reason or another, and they went, my TB's gone. I feel perfectly well.
Yeah, if this was the case, if eating someone else made you well and stronger...
The human population would be gone within about 20 years.
Yeah, we'd know by now, wouldn't we? I mean, this is something people do. I mean, occasionally.
Well, actually, just mentioning TB actually just reminded me the point where I decided I'm actually rooting for Ives and nobody else in this movie was when you find out that Ives, it was a terribly sick man. I mean, he had had TB, and I think he had loads of other ailments, and he said he was heading across America to die. That's where he was going. He was going to find a place to die, and then he got this lifeline just dropped on his lap, and he took it, and now, you know, he wants to live. He's enjoying life, and, you know, does that make him the bad guy just because, coincidentally, he was a dying man who, in the last-ditch desperation, took a stab in the dark at some ancient legend, and boom, worked out it was actually true, and now he's completely healthy.
Well, yeah, it does make him the bad guy because he killed and ate a bunch of people.
Only to save himself, originally.
True. But that's the sort of funny thing about this movie. It's really satirizing that whole American idea of the manifest destiny, and you sort of take what you can get, and, you know, if anyone fails to stop you, it just means they were too weak. You know, like, might makes right. It's this really sort of sick, weird perversion of the American dream, essentially, is what we're watching here. It's kind of fascinating in a way.
I completely agree, but I did think that. I thought, like, I don't know how much I dislike him as a character now that I found out he was just a dying man, desperate.
He is very charismatic. He's a great charismatic villain.
Well, that's Robert Carlyle for you.
Yeah, obviously. But I mean, it's also the writing, because he does come across, like, really well as written. I think Robert Carlyle's performance obviously helps it out a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the whole script, everyone's part was so well written. Start to finish, it was well written and beautifully executed, and I, really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Grant. So I think that's kind of our conclusion. More people need to see Ravenous.
They do. I mean, anybody I've mentioned this to, I was like, oh, what movie are you going to be reviewing for your first podcast? Oh, it's going to be Ravenous. Oh, I've never seen it. Never even heard of it. Like, nobody has ever heard of this movie.
I hadn't heard of it until about 6 months ago.
I caught it on TV once when I was young, and then that's it. Forgot about it. But, really enjoyed it.
Great, good. So anyway, what do we have lined up for next week?
Well, now next week we're gonna really lower the tone. If I'm being honest, you can already tell my opinion of this next week's movie because we're gonna lower the tone with Waterboy.
Oh boy.
Yep, I am looking forward to it.
Oh, Waterboy.
Oh, it's gonna be
fun times.
It's gonna be very interesting. We're gonna have some interesting conversations about that.
Yeah, I think so.
I think next week might be the first show that we air.
I think that might be our first show proper, so let's just see how it goes.
Well, we'll see how this goes. This didn't go so bad. We'll see how the editing goes, if there is any editing. I'm a little lazy, so... Are we
going to leave in the discussions about editing in editing?
Probably, yeah.
Great, good.
I'm all up for...
A little bit meta.
A little bit meta there.
Well, anyway, for now, this is Two Friends Watch, and we will see you next week for Waterboy. Hope you've enjoyed it.
Yep, see you later.
Bye for now.